Hi, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Gamers at the End of the World. I'm Ty Justice.
And I'm JCPR.
And today we're going to try and tackle some gaming topics from vintage to cutting edge. So I guess today we wanted to start it out with news, which is kind of interesting because I'm a huge film nut. I'm a film historian. And, a collector, of course, as people in the video can see. Welcome to my set. This is a small piece of it. But at the same time, I wanted to talk movie tie-ins because recently the two lead characters for the Zelda movie have just been announced. And I don't know if you saw any of that news come up.
I did. I just saw it recently a few days ago.
Right. And do you know the actors?
No, they are relatively unknown to me personally.
Gotcha. And I think I have, let me see, I pulled up a little bit of it before just so we can see. And I think Bo Bragason, will be playing Princess Zelda, and Benjamin Evan Ainsworth is going to be playing Link, which I think is kind of fascinating because I don't know these kids, I don't know these actors, but at the same time that doesn't mean they don't have credits and aren't going to be good. And the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to specifically talk about casting in films, and we're going to get to a little bit about movie tie-ins and games and chicken or the egg. But when it comes to something like when it comes to something like this, do you think that casting unknowns or relative unknowns is better than casting a name? Because in this film, fan casting for a lot of years now has been Tom Holland.
Right. I think it's just a matter of how the creatives see it.
Right.
Because as with it came down to the Mario movie, they did choose known actors, but at the same time, I feel like they looked into enough people and they're like, you know what? These are the ones we want. These are the ones that fit the role the best. They play the character well.
Right.
And I'd say overall, they were pretty spot on with it, especially Charlie Day as Luigi.
Right.
But I feel more so that the unknown casting, or casting the unknowns, comes from the fact of them wanting to make multiple.
Right.
Starting them off while, they're youngins, and then eventually as they grow older, they can adapt different stories, adapt different aspects of the games, eventually maybe make, crossovers in that sort of sense. Because it's always about that.
Right.
Every movie nowadays is planned to be a universe or a series, everything.
Yeah, there's no standalone just films unless it's an indie film. But if it's a property or a franchise like this, they have to. And the nature of the Zelda franchise is a franchise.
It is.
So I mean, it kind of you're like, okay, I get it, that's fine. And the first thing that comes to mind, because I'm also, as for those watching the video, in the back of the set, I have an authentic 1978 Mylar Superman poster from the film, and one of the green and silver posters with the S shield on it. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is Christopher Reeve. He was a really relative unknown. He did a soap for a little while. He did a lot of stage work, and then he got Superman. He was third build, but I don't think anybody can argue that wasn't genius casting, and they didn't want him because he was too skinny, and there's all this story about it. But it became one of the most glorious casting decisions in all, I think, of superhero comic book films.
And I think film in general, because he really does embody the character so well.
Yeah.
Comparing it to castings nowadays, I feel like there was always a face attached to it. It's not like, oh, that's Captain America. It's like, oh, that's Chris Evans.
Right.
Or it's like, oh, that's Robert Downey Jr. That's not Iron Man.
Right.
But I feel like in the case of maybe Christopher Reeve and Tobey Maguire, which I think is they are an actor, but when you see them, they are that character.
Well, see, this is what I wanted to ask you specifically too, because speaking of Tobey Maguire, because you're a big fan of the original, the films, the first,
of course,
first three, the Sam Raimi films, excuse me.
Yeah, no, of course.
But now, do you think Tom Holland is going to be typecast because he came to everybody's purview? I mean, he was a child actor. He was in a movie, the movie about the tsunami. I remember that, and I didn't know that until I looked him up. I'm like, oh, he was that kid.
Yeah, and then he would do a lot of theater as well,
Exactly.
a lot of dance choreography, that sort of thing.
And he is now Spider-Man. And I remember back when he started, he's like, well, I'm still doing this. By the time I'm 30, there's going to be something wrong. But now he's, of course, in his 30s. I think he's in his 30s, and he's still doing it. But it's a good franchise for him, and he does really well. And I liked him a lot. And I'm kind of like the naysayer, bring back the old guys, bring back the originals. But I liked him. I think he was really good. And I hope he does it for as long as possible, as long as he gets good films.
As do I. To take it back to what you said.
Do you think he's going to be typecast because of that?
I feel like No, at least now, no. As seeing the trailer for Christopher Nolan's new film, The Odyssey,
The Odyssey,
I
yeah.
feel like that's really gonna take him to a whole nother level.
Right.
And he's done work outside of the Spider-Man universe sort of thing, the MCU, but I just always feel like they're not giving him the right material. Because I think overall he's a fantastic what's it called, actor. You know,
Right.
he's great at what he does.
Oh, yeah.
But it's always been the material that I think really does him badly.
Right.
You know, as
We'll remember
say,
the Uncharted film, and
oh god,
yeah.
don't bring it up.
Yeah, right.
You know, movies like Cherry, the more recent one he did. A lot of people just go about saying that, oh, you know, it's just another Tom Holland movie. You know,
Right.
it's not like, oh my god, it's new Spider-Man movie. You know, like they have that excitement, you know, for those comic films.
Well, at the same time, I think too, when Tobey Maguire was doing it, because we have to remember, like, superhero films were so passe. Everybody still had the bad taste in their mouths from the original. I mean, the '90s films, Marvel specifically,
Yeah.
because it was Blade. I think people forget the movie Blade is what brought Marvel out of bankruptcy, and that was a Marvel film. That was their first film out of bankruptcy, because they did Captain America and the Punisher in the late '80s.
They also did Thor.
And Thor in the '70s, because I was actually an episode from, or one of the TV movies from the Incredible Hulk TV series. It wasn't even his own thing. And I
Gosh.
think the actor that played him was a football player before, because he was in a sitcom in the '90s. I forget what it's called, but no, he was a good actor. I mean, in the comedies, you know, the
Right.
Thor thing was a little stunted, but you know that was not his fault necessarily. But they had all those things. They did Doctor Strange in 1980. They did a TV pilot that didn't get picked up. There was all that fun stuff that they tried to do. The only thing that really worked for them was the Incredible Hulk and kind of the limited edition Spider-Man series they did back in the '70s with Nicholas Hammond, which I love.
I do.
But when it comes to like Tobey Maguire, I think we have to remember context of the time is always important to me when looking at these things and explaining it, because you had X-Men, you had Blade, big deal. Wasn't like, oh, it's a Marvel movie. It was a comic book movie at best. And he wasn't even a mainstream character. He was a B character in a Dracula comic from the '70s. That's how much they're just like, let's test the waters.
Well, I think that's why it worked, because they didn't really advertise it as a Marvel movie. It's hey, it's a horror movie.
Because-
It's a vampire hunter, you know?
Yeah, because there wasn't a Marvel movie then. That's the
Right.
thing. Like, we see Marvel movies as Marvel movies. Back then, there was no such thing. There was comic book movies, comics from Marvel. And, you know, like before, like I said, and before that, even the big ones, DC, by the late '90s, were really spazzing out with like Batman Forever, you know, which was passable, Batman and Robin. And then you got into a lot of the TV stuff. They even did like an X Factor, an X Force TV show. They did, also, you remember David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. They did a TV movie based on that. A lot of the stuff they tried and did not work, really. I mean, not like it started to work. So in the '90s with Tobey Maguire, I'm sorry, late '90s, early 2000s, when that started to come around, and you had X-Men in 2000, which then kind of blew it up and legitimized it, and then you had Spider-Man and then all the rest. You know, I think, like, it was a little different for him, like, because then he did Seabiscuit, and he did all these things. I still think people kind of see him as, like, the first Spider-Man, though. Well, and look at Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton did a lot of work. He was a comedian. He did Mr. Mom, Johnny Dangerously, Clean and Sober. He did a lot of dramatic roles before he ever did Batman. He'd been working like hard in the business 5, 6, 7 years and getting a lot of recognition and accolades before he ever did, as a dramatic actor, before he did and comedy, before he did Batman. But people still were like, "Hey, Batman," because he would say this in interviews. He's like, "Come on, man," you know, you know. But then he came around to it again in the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, which I thought was a cool, like, full circle moment for him. But still, it took him a long time to shake that.
Seriously. I think also too, because he still attaches himself to those like comics, superhero sort of things, because he also did Birdman, right? If I'm not
Birdman,
mistaken.
yeah, and that had to be in like some. He was perfect for it because of his history as Batman.
Right. It makes total sense. And then, like you were saying, in Spider-Man Homecoming, he was the Vulture. He always associated himself in that sphere.
Right.
And I think that's what didn't help.
Right.
But
right.
then...
Well, I
when
think by the time he became the Vulture, I think he was okay with it, because
Yeah.
I think he'd done like enough smaller films, because he did a Christopher Reeve movie too. They both did Speechless. I think the movie Speechless or something like that together.
left me speechless.
Yeah, right. But you're like, hey, it's Batman, Superman. But they did that in the early '90s. But you know, still, I think he needed time to get away from it because he did, and you didn't really see him in a lot of big things. You had some comedies in the '90s. He turned down the third Batman film. He stepped away from it because he finally admitted like a couple years ago, the script was dumb. It was stupid. Of course, I wasn't going to do it. It was garbage. So that's why he kind of moved away from it, and then did things. And I remember like when Live from Baghdad came out and he was in that. I'm like, oh, it was Michael Keaton. And then you see him do little things here and there, and then Birdman, and then he just kind of like swept. He came back, finally kind of accepting that part of the fandom, especially since it became so legitimate by the time he became Vulture. Because even after, the Batman movies, nobody wanted to be associated with those when, the Marvel movies started coming out in the early 2000s. So, there was no like, hey, maybe I'll go back to it. He's like, hell no. Mm-mm. But, after they started gaining momentum and legitimacy and respect in the industry, then he kind of came back to it at a great time. And, to play a villain,
Mm-hmm. And I think he does it well. I think he more so was able to accept it because of seeing the fandom. The demand for it, understanding it, seeing everybody hype it up.
Oh, yeah.
And treat him like, oh, you really shaped, a part of us.
Yeah.
And we're forever associating you with that because it means that much.
And I think that, the cast of Star Trek and a lot of these other franchises kind of got to that point.
Harrison Ford,
Star
Wars, he hates the Han Solo questions. He hates all Star Wars related
I know.
things.
Poor guy. That's the one thing he's been asked the most. But he had a very he had a very robust career beyond Star Wars, which was really nice, and that gave him his start. That really made him a household name and a star. And I think he jokes about it now, but as time goes on and little kids keep coming up to him, they go, Han Solo, he'll be even more receptive to it because it becomes such a type of immortality that when you're a younger actor or when you're in your midlife and you're trying to make a name for yourself and just keep working and do good work to fulfill yourself, it's a different beast. But now he's slowing down and, it's it's more charming, but it's just more of a pain in the ass because back and they're like, didn't you do Indiana Jones? Like, yeah, but I can do a comedy. No, you can't,
Right.
Or or whatever it is. Or they keep, or like Christopher Reeve said, they kept sending him dumb action scripts after Superman. He's like, I don't want to do these. This is not the kind of career I want because he's a Juilliard trained actor. But for these kids, the young actors, that are in Zelda, I think Lord of the Rings started this because that was a years long process to film that trilogy. And when he signed up, Elijah Wood and all the people with careers, and some were new, they knew they were in it for the long haul. I don't know if everybody was cool with that, but I think that's become standard now. Like, you sign on for one, you basically sign up for four. And this isn't a new thing. Like in the '90s with The Rocketeer, they signed them up for 3 films when they first did, but didn't make as much money as they thought it would. So, they nixed those. But now it's like a foregone conclusion that you're going to make at least 3 films.
At least.
Yeah.
And that's something they always talk about. Okay, we're locked in for a 3-5-year contract, It's always been like that.
So I wonder now,
at least
too.
For me. That's all I've heard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It feels like it's rather unheard of for just signing up for one film and then just calling it.
Because so many films are just, everybody wants established IP, an established IP for a guarantee of a number of films, so they don't have the Batman thing happen. What's the Batman thing? You have a bunch of different actors playing Batman, because it gets kind of weird. Then the audience can't lock in, and it gets confusing. And then you're like, well, we got to write this for his character because he, and blah blah blah.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the thing too. It's like people are like, we don't, because for years they wanted to do a Superman film for many years, different iterations. Things almost came to pass. Josh Hartnett was doing costume tests for I think Flyby, which was J.J. Abrams' Superman film, something like that. So with the Zelda film, they're definitely going to do a few. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was about to say the infamous Nicolas Cage suit test.
Which, dude, I have the documentary that was made. The sound quality's not great on it, unfortunately, but as a documentary, it's great. Kevin Smith is interviewed, who I've met a few times, really great guy, and also. Tim Burton is are you mocking me with your fingers?
Oh no, I'm just like that just seemed fun to do. I might as well try it out.
No, the evil finger thing. I'm just wiggling my fingers around as I think. But no, Tim Burton is interviewed in that. Unfortunately, the guy who made the documentary and interviewed them passed away. But the documentary is kind of fascinating because they were showing how far they were getting with it, and a lot of the suit designs were kind of weird. But then when it started to come together at the end, and they did the final composite. You're like, okay, maybe that could have worked because they would have went through future iterations. And then the funny thing is, it's always said too, like with Bryan Singer, he's like Voldemort. Nobody speaks his name anymore for reasons. But he would go around the set because there were some production people on Superman Returns who were involved in Superman Lives, which was the Tim Burton Superman. And he'd go walking around with a photo of Nicolas Cage in that costume. He goes, "You guys were going to make this." And he would mock them.
Right.
And then Superman Returns didn't make good money. And then, he just kind of shut up about it because he claimed he was a big Superman fan. But, the Nick Cage things, because the Nick Cage film is what got me into writing. Because I was always a huge Superman fan. So in high school, I downloaded the script that Kevin Smith was going to use because I was curious. And I read it and went, I can do better than this. It's garbage. Especially the death of Superman. That was like the point where I fell in love with Superman and all that as a kid. And I tried it, failed miserably, but after that I just kept writing because it just kind of stuck. It stuck, and I ended up loving it. But it was all Kevin Smith's fault. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating. But yeah, he walk around like mocking them, like, "You guys were gonna make this," and then his film didn't do well. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have mocked them because they were trying. And I knew the guy that actually built the props for Superman Lives. They were building like the Brainiac skulls, the small ships, and he was doing the props for it and everything. I worked with him on the set of True Blood. As one of the Church of the Light, and he was wearing the pants because he was a big costume guy. He produced, and it was his costume shop that produced the costumes for the original Alien versus Batman, or Alien versus Predator, which was a Batman short done in like the early 2000s. And these realistic, like movie quality Predator costumes as Batman fought off the Alien and the Predators, and Joker's in it too. And he was the guy in one of the suits because he's a big dude, dragon drawn it. He also produced the costume, the Mr. Freeze costume for Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin.
Cool party.
And he was, cool party, yeah, chill. But he built all that, and he's actually in the documentaries on the DVDs and Blu-rays, on the 4Ks. And he said, because he talks about it in the documentary, that he wore the suit and did shoulder rolls in it to see how mobile it was. Oh. And they used every LED in the city and that they could find at any of the shops for all the LEDs in the costume.
Yeah.
So we were talking for 3 days, and I was just picking his brain for all that stuff because I was a big nerd. I still am. But he was also wearing in his costume for the show for True Blood. We were filming at Rose Hills.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it was our holding was in a mausoleum. It was really weird. But it were 3 overnight shoots. But he was wearing Darth Vader's pants because he actually had the pants that David Prowse wore in the Star Wars films. Those are the actual pants, the leather, like however they made it. He was wearing them.
What the heck?
The guy was big. Dragon's a big guy, but
his name's Dragon.
Dragon Drawn It.
Dragon
Yeah, dude, I know, hell of a name, but he was a real nice guy. He was very patient with my questions, but I loved all that, and I really went on a tangent here with that. But no, I think going back to what we were saying about these guys, yeah, it's going to be it. But now the question is, which storyline are they going to go with?
For Zelda?
For Zelda.
I honestly think they might want to adapt the Toon Link stories.
All right.
Since the actor is so young.
Right.
And as he grows older, eventually they'll adapt things like, maybe Skyward Sword, maybe the Twilight Princess, maybe the Breath of the Wild,
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of Time, whatever that is.
Never heard of that.
I'm not a nerd. I don't play video games.
Right, you just work at a nerd store.
Yeah, exactly. I just have this nerd stuff all around me.
Right. These are mine, by the way.
Not for long.
Not for long. Punches me and runs off.
No, I couldn't go far.
But with that, that's the next question. Like, what storyline are they going to adapt, and how many of the fans are they going to disappoint? Because you can't do all of them. It's such a wide universe. It's been around almost 40 years.
It's I don't know, because there's so many things you can do.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
that's the problem too.
Yeah, it's the problem because at the same time you got to think about the fans, but then it's like, then you think about the fans, like, how are they going to react to this? Are they going to like sing this? Who are we going to get for Ganondorf? Or what are we going to do here? How do you make it look right?
Nerd. That's all of us. No, but
especially you.
Right, right, and me.
No, especially.
Got to be proud, man. You got to be proud of that. The
Except
nerds,
Tom. Tom, if you're listening, we don't like you.
No, Tom.
Yeah.
I don't know what Tom we're talking about.
I don't know. He'll know.
He'll know. Tom will know.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing. That's going to be the problem now, having to figure out how to do it to appease both the fans and the non-fans, because let's be honest, the non-fans are the ones you have to appease to, because I saw Kevin Smith speak at the Writers Guild when I just started writing, and they asked him, so what'd you think about Daredevil? And he is like, I thought
Ben Affleck?
the Ben Affleck.
Okay,
oh yeah,
okay.
this is back when that was the only one. He goes, yeah, the Ben Affleck one, and he goes, I thought it was great. They gave me a part because he plays like the Undertaker or something like that, or the Coroner. I'm sorry, and he's got a cameo, and he's like, I was in it. They gave me a part. I thought it was great. And then the follow up question was, well, don't you think they should have appealed more to the comic book audience, you know? And he goes, look, the best selling comic book at the time is like Superman or Batman. Their circulation's about 150,000, maybe more now. He goes, but if a movie was made just for the comic book fans and 150,000 fans guaranteed went to go see it, that would be the biggest failure in movie history.
Right.
So you have to ground it to where everybody kind of understands, which is, I think that's where they got a lot of the new Star Wars sequels wrong, because you had to do a lot of homework and backstory instead of explaining. And I don't think a lot of movies really do that anymore. I love the new Superman, the James Gunn Superman, but again, nothing was explained. You don't know anybody's stories. People just kind of show up, and in classic screenwriting, that's a bad script. But I think Superman, like the reboot of Star Trek in 2009, you don't really care as much about the structure. The structure was fine in 2009, but the villain, there was no villain. It was just a two-dimensional character, and poor Eric Bana just got kind of forgotten. But you weren't watching it for that. For this Superman, you weren't watching it for that, because you were watching it for the new Superman. You were watching it for the cast. The story was kind of fun, but it was more like an episode of a TV show.
Right.
But it was fun, but it wasn't bad. But he can't get away with that in a second film.
You can't. No, you can't.
Superman 2 has to be more established.
Yeah, I feel like this is the problem some people had with it, where things are happening. You know, it's trying to do a lot, I feel, because it's trying to establish a new universe, characters that the audience is super unfamiliar with. I'm sure. I mean, how many people knew about Guy Gardner? How many people knew about Mr. Terrific, you know?
Exactly. And Mr. Terrific has, at least with Guy Gardner, there was a line where he said, I'm part of the Green Lantern Corps or the Green Lantern Corps. So you're like, okay, that's something. Mr. Terrific, he just kind of shows up with no backstory. I loved his character. He's
Yeah,
great.
he was fantastic in the film. He was probably like the most fun character, in my opinion.
Hawk Girl. Like, where did she come? They show her in an apartment at one point, but you get Supergirl is a cat. Spoiler alert! I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen
Spider-Man's in there.
No.
You never know. No. What's going on here?
But with Supergirl, it's a cameo.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a fun one, but it's not what you did. But at the same time, they're very lucky. Everybody was very charming. And it was a very fun movie. I give it a 7 out of 10.
Right.
You know, and I liked it. I did. I enjoyed it. And Superman needed a win. And especially with the storylines, like the more the human-based storylines, I thought that was great. It was such a great touch, and that carries so much of the film.
That's the good thing. Yeah. I feel like that's the thing that a lot of modern superhero movies are missing.
They're neutral about it.
They're very neutral about it, but... And I hate to put it in this light, but, like, for me, one of my most favorite films that has come out in recent years is like Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah.
But in that movie, it's very about, okay, we gotta kill, you know?
Yeah.
We gotta kill, we gotta fight this guy, you know, we gotta get revenge in a sense, you know?
Yeah.
But in this movie, it's very much in a sense of hope, you know, believing in the good of people. Like a line specifically that Lois said to Clark. She was like, you always believe in the good in people, you know? And I think that's the most, I guess, touching aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the superhero movies, I feel, lean into the very dreary, the very moody, the very angsty side of it.
Right.
But to have such a hopeful film with such a hopeful character who always tries to see the good in people, and people take away from that, you know, they're like, oh, maybe I should start being this way. And you even see it like in social media. You know, a lot of people talking about how the film made them feel, how they want to try to be better.
Right.
You know, kind of replicate it in a sense.
Yeah, and you know, it brings up an interesting point, because I see what you're saying. What we were talking about earlier, yeah, a lot of the superhero films just kind of dodge those topics. This one went head first, took no prisoners, and I will watch it, and I will support that film because of that. They did amazing things. The minor stuff, like, we just needed a Superman film because we know everything. We just needed one that was good, and so this was good.
Yeah.
But with Batman, and it was kind of started as a joke, but like Batman, they're like, yeah, some guy gets jacked up on a Wayne Enterprises job, messes up his back, you know, gets into a lot of trouble, incurable medical debt. Then he has to, and then his coverage is denied by, Wayne Medical. And then he's got to, go score some Percocet off the street. Then Batman comes along, beats the crap out of him, And it's like, well, why don't we have a Batman film where he starts actually putting away like the criminals, like the actual like corporate criminals that are, jacking up the healthcare system and things like that he benefits from, because he's just this billionaire playboy who gets to go around beat up people that are stealing bread. He's not Jean Valjean. He's Joubert, or who's the character in Les Mis. He's the cop, basically. He's kind of not the hero. And, that's also brings up the point of like why he lets these villains live when he should kill them, because he lets them live and they end up, killing all these people anyway, which makes him culpable. But that's a whole different story. But yeah, seeing Batman kind of tackle like his own family's legacy, maybe, because that's what I wish they would have done in the Joker 2, like shown Batman from the Joker's perspective as really kind of an asshole, like his dad. That would have been an interesting, unique take. And I love Batman, don't get me wrong, but but with this aspect of Superman taking on real world topics about saving people in spite of political borders, and doing the right thing as opposed to what the media tells you is right. On either side, just to save people, because that's kind of what you need to do. With Batman, it'd kind of be interesting to see him, using his power for good that way and tearing down the system that, keeps him afloat in a way.
I know exactly what you mean. Because at that point, it's like, are you really a hero? Or are you just playing like the villain role, but you're not seeing it in your eyes, know? Everyone else sees you as like, the coolest dude ever, but maybe you're not.
You're just scary. And I get the intimidation factor with Batman. It's great. But but at the end of the day, you really think about it from a realistic point of view, which I think Superman is helping a lot of audiences see it. It's like, well, wait a minute, this billionaire is just going out beating up poor people? Like,
help him, dude.
Help him, yeah. It's like
buy the guy a sandwich.
They're not all gang members, bro. Like they predict, like, hey man, let's kick his ass. There's a bunch of punks with like rods in a corner just waiting to punk people.
It's like a mentally unstable man goes around and kills his son. But if a guy steals bread, he throws a sewer like cap at him,
right? Like a Ninja Turtle.
Just like, don't do that again.
I know. How dare you? How dare you? That bread costs money.
Yeah.
Well, that's the take that, poors.
Take that, poor people. I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. You're poor.
I made $3,000 in the 5 seconds I've been speaking to you.
Right. But no, I mean, it's kind of interesting. And it's kind of, the more you think about it, the less Batman makes sense. Because even with Superman, when he first started out in not only the comics, but in the comic strips and the newspapers, his villains weren't superhero villains. They weren't super powered. They weren't for a long time. They were kind of kooky after a while, especially in the 50s. But when you go to like the strips, he was taking down like corrupt corporate people, or people that were just like corrupt foremen. They were corrupt mine owners. They were like crooked train depot operator. There was these like people that were like bosses, and he was very anti-establishment because he would pick up on a lot of corruption that was happening in a lot of the excavations and like building up of America. He would go like to mines and fight union problems. He would do not on the side of the anti-unionists, but on the side of the unions, trying to save people that were trying to do good for their families. Like this was in the 30s and early 40s. Superman became, of course, a face for the war when the war started. Like a lot of characters became pro-American and all that. Captain America is a direct result of World War II. But it's funny. It's interesting that a lot of these, like Superman was woke, and I just saw a video where it shows George Reeves in his because they did a movie. It was a movie they did. It was the first Superman movie called Superman and the Mole Men, and it was about xenophobia, and it was about being scared and hating the other, because that was going around a lot in America at the time. Anti-Semitism and anti-black and all that stuff that was going on, and still goes on in some ways, in many ways,
unfortunately.
But he was taking that on too. Superman's always been a so-called woke character, and I hate using the word like that.
That word just lost all meaning. People just throw it around thinking they know what they're talking about,
and that's the diluting of it, and I think that was kind of the point, to villainize a word that meant something so radically correct. It was such a radically correct term to be woke, meaning it was cool, but it was also about social awareness and being awake when it comes to injustices. And then the right, or whoever wants to turn it around and makes it this political point of contention, and just again dilutes the word, so the meaning is lost, and it's just kind of colonized, let's say. And it's terribly misused constantly, but I'll use it in the way it's intended, and to be woke or to stay woke and to be aware of social injustices and do something about it is what Superman and superhero comics were always about. You know, even Wonder Woman, you know, she was a fighter for justice, you know, and she was a woman, granted in a skirt, but she was still a woman who was strong and, you know, would fight for the rights of the impoverished and those who needed her. And even certain comic books, like Alex Ross did this series called, or these oversized series, and I forget what his was called, but Superman was Peace on Earth. And he, you know, painted the entire run of these things. They did one for Shazam. They did one for all the origins of the heroes. But Batman's interesting too, because there's one shot where he paints like a corrupt cop getting a payoff, you know, and you know these comic books have always been that way. So people that are like, well, they made him woke. No, they didn't make him woke. They just stayed true to his origins.
Right. It's just people who want to consume media, but they don't want to think about it, you know?
What did we say? Oh, we said something in the shop the other day that made a lot of sense, because I heard, I didn't originate this isn't me, but it made a lot of sense. So they're like, you don't like what your characters are because you guys grew up to be the villains. That's the only reason you don't like what they are now. And I completely agree with that.
Exactly. People were made that way, you know?
Yeah.
They were led to believe a certain thing, and now they're seeing it for what it truly is, you know, where they didn't think beyond what the page was or anything like that. It's just...
And that's the crazy thing, because most good science fiction in general is always political. Like art isn't political. Art is always political, whether you believe it or not. If you go back enough, the history surrounding art and specific art is always political. If you go back to the Medici and the Borgia and all that as well, you know, all these legacy families and all that. You know, there's always some political tie-in somewhere somehow, and you know. It's a fascinating thing when you look back and see that it all is. But you know, Superman was created because two Jewish kids, you know, were aware of what was going on, you know, across the pond, you know, and they wanted someone that like Superman to come along and save them, you know. And it's in history, you know, the Greeks, the Romans, whatever it is, these heroes were created because of certain oppression that was happening in certain arenas.
I totally know what you're talking about. How to put it? Everything is made with intention, especially, art. Well, I mean, when you say art, I mean, you got to define it. I mean, like film.
Well, yeah, all art, but specifically what we're talking about, film, TV, Twilight Zone, same thing. The Monsters Who Do on Maple Street, I read that in junior high. They have it part of the curriculum now because it's about xenophobia and hating one another. But all the best art, all the best movies, TV, and film all have a message.
All do.
Yeah.
They all do. No matter how geeky, no matter how nerdy, it always has a message. It always has something to prove.
Yeah.
You know, it always has something to stand up for.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what makes him so long-standing. Or not long-standing. I'm not even speaking correctly.
No, you're right.
It makes
that makes them.
It makes them timeless.
It
in
gives
a sense,
them longevity.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this new Superman film is gonna be that.
Yeah.
I think in years' time, people are gonna look back and be like, "Wow." You know, even now it still reflects on current, you know,
topics.
Current topics, things like that.
Yeah. And it's important. I think that a film like Superman, the new one, the James Gunn Superman, is important for that reason. And like I said, there are parts that I ignored, that I didn't agree with because it had to do with structure and the way a script is supposed to be written. A movie just being I want movies to be standalone and great on their own, and not like a great thing split up into three parts.
Right.
Like do three great things, not one great thing stretched out three ways. But there was so many other things that were so important about this film. Like I'm glad to overlook that. And same thing with like the 2009 Star Trek. It was really good. I overlooked a paper thin villain, you know. And but for Superman, it was just such a breath of fresh air.
Right.
You know, it was so great.
It's such a hopeful, colorful film.
And I don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know. It's okay. It's just, it felt like the right thing at the right time. You know.
Yeah.
It's just, it was great. I watched it again.
I know. I saw your
just
post.
Yesterday. Yeah. It was still phenomenal. If anything, I like it more the second time around.
Exactly.
I know what to expect, and then when I see it, I'm just like, wow, this is fantastic.
Right. Exactly.
It's
And
strong, strong feeling. I love it so
it's
much.
amazing, but it's also amazing that other Superman actors don't have the same opinions. We all know we will not say his name, but he played him on TV, and he also
Not
said
well.
not well.
Not
And
well.
this sucks because I liked that iteration because it was charming because it wasn't they didn't have a lot of money. So what happens when you don't have a lot of money for a TV show? You make it charming, and they didn't have a lot of money for effects, so they had to make it a charming Lois and Clark romance thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing how some people even you play the character. You read the comics growing up, and you're just clueless.
Right. It's like, and I'm not going to get too specific, certain people that like the Star Wars brand, but then follow people that kind of reflect the negative sides of it.
The Empire.
The Empire, yeah.
It's like,
And
how did you root for the rebels and then vote for the Empire?
did you not watch the film?
Did you not watch the film? Well, that's the
You know what
crazy
this
thing. That's the crazy thing. The hero's journey is what George Lucas wrote that about, and there's a certain spiritual message in that, but there is a message he wrote. It was about the Viet Cong. It wasn't about like just space wars. It was about the Viet Cong, and America represented the empire. That's what he wrote it as, and he wrote this as an allegory for Vietnam, and that's why I think it hits so well. But again, people are like, no, why can't why does it have to be political? Why does punk rock have to be political? You morons! It was always political.
That's what makes it punk rock, man.
Anti-establishment for a reason. They just don't want to. They're not just anarchists. There's a reason, and Rage Against the Machine is a great example of that.
People don't want substance.
No,
No, they just want flashing effects. They want big loud noise.
they want echo chambers. That's the thing. It's like, don't tell me I'm wrong. Then stop being wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
Seriously.
dude, seriously, man.
My God.
Like, or at least be open to have an honest conversation about it. You know what I mean? Because let's face it, we're not going to always like people's opinions, other people's opinions about, what we like or what we think, and that's fine. But you got to have an open discussion about it. And then, you just understand after a while, once you break down your differences, you realize that it's the rich. They're the ones that you got to go after because they're the ones pulling the strings.
Not each other.
Exactly.
We're in the same spot, man.
Right, exactly.
What did I do?
I know. It's like, well, you're going to hate somebody just because they're a different color than you, but you're both poor. Like, work together. The only way to change that is to work together and stop the idiots that are pulling the strings on you to make you hate one another and ignore the fact that these guys, the wealthy, are the ones with the hands in your pocket.
And they're not going to care about you.
No,
they don't care.
No, they don't care if you die. Absolutely not. But again, with Superman, it was great. I wonder, and this is kind of a long shot, but nobody thought it was going to happen with Superman. I wonder if Zelda, the movie, will have any kind of underlying political messages. I don't know if it's a series that lends itself to any of that, because I've only played a handful of the games.
I feel like it's just a more so, and forgive me because again I am not as familiar with the series myself. I feel like it's just it lends itself to like fantasy storytelling. There could be elements of like a stronger, maybe a greater message, but I think it's more focused on delivering charming, cool adventure.
I wonder though. See, but I wonder since with Superman's success, because it's making a ton of money, which is great. It did like over 200 million its opening weekend. I wonder if people kind of pay attention now, because it's not going to be out until 2027, the Zelda movie. It's projected for that. But I wonder if a lot of writers now and a lot of executives are like, hey, people kind of like this. Maybe we should go. And let's face it, that's what Hollywood is. They're like, oh, this works. Let's do it too.
Yeah.
So I wonder what Batman 2 is going to look like with Pattinson. And I wonder what...
They just finished the script,
Yeah,
right?
Matt Reeves. That took a while.
Very long time.
So I wonder if they're going to make some changes, or if they've just been paying attention. Maybe that's why it took so long.
Maybe it'll go to what you were saying, where Bruce kind of questions his whole, what's it called? He questions the way he grew up. He questions, like, is it really right to be this billionaire, superhero vigilante sort of thing?
Beating up the poor.
Choose a side.
Yeah. Choose a side. Wouldn't that be a trip if you saw Batman, a woke Batman? Let's hope for a woke Batman.
Oh,
let's
gosh,
do that. Instead of like, let's stop rooting for the billionaires, because that's not popular anymore. Like simping for the billionaires, like that's not working. In fact, it's kind of doing the opposite.
Yeah, it does worse.
And exactly, and I think people are just waking up to that, and they're like, and Batman's becoming less popular in certain circles because of that, not just because he's wealthy, and I'm not just because he's a vigilante, but because of the wealth aspect of it. And I think people want to see him doing more when it comes to helping with his money. And we've seen we've done the Chris Nolan things, man. They are great films. The Chris Nolan films are great. They didn't embrace some aspects of the comics enough, I think, but at the same time, since that's done, maybe we can kind of see it, because I think that's what people are ready for now, because things happen so close to each other these days. Like, well, we saw that in that Batman film. Give us something different with Batman. It doesn't have to be the same story every time.
That's
I don't know.
very true. So I keep looking at all your Batman stuff.
Oh, yeah, the animated. I have a lot of. So behind me, there's a lot of Batman the animated series stuff. I kept the DVDs as well because I think the fourth volume of the DVD set has the Batman Superman introduction song. That's the introduction. That's
Best
nowhere
friends
else.
forever.
Not that one.
Oh,
Not
okay.
not that one. But like it's a really cool thumping beat, and it wasn't included in any of the Blu-rays for either Superman or Batman. So I'm like, I
Interesting.
can't get rid of those because that's classic.
Right. You bootlicker.
Right? I know, corporate Warner Brothers bootlicker.
Look what he got here.
Oh man! But a lot of this stuff was gotten through trade, I will say. But no, but I think the new films coming out, I think maybe Zelda. I don't know if it's going to have anything to do with that, but I do know because it's a monarch kind of story. So there are kings, there are princesses, and there are a lot of earthbound spirits and things like that. So they may go a certain way.
Earthbound?
Yeah, well, there's sprites and there are like these fairies, and there's a lot of different types of characters within Zelda and the world of Zelda that I've found playing the newer games. I didn't grow up playing a lot of it, but now there's just kind of a very magical fantasy world that they could do a lot with. And I think, like I said, with the success of Superman, I think a lot of companies that are going to be, because it's Avi Arad that's producing this film.
Really?
Yeah, I know. I was surprised. Like, really? Like the original
He's gonna
Spider?
put Venom in there.
Right, I know, just for the fun of
Just
it.
for the fun.
But we'll see how far they want to go if they're going to get political in any way. I don't know.
That would be interesting.
But like Batman coming up, if they do a Wonder Woman, that Wonder Woman's always
Well, they
political.
said that's the next big project they want to do,
Yeah.
right? A Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I wonder what that's gonna tackle. I wonder how they're gonna want to adapt that. What story are you gonna adapt?
Yeah. Well, or what era? See, that's
What
the thing too.
era?
What
Yeah,
era?
yeah.
The George Perez era is usually the best era for Wonder Woman. People love that. There's a lot of a lot of stuff here and there that is just really not just good but great. But no, I think there's going to be a lot of messages coming in, and I think tying into this because there's a lot of things we wanted to talk about. But I think the other thing, because we're talking about Zelda and movies, I wanted to talk about adaptations. So adaptations. So let's do it this way. So when a movie comes out that's like a superhero film, you have a game adaptation, right? That's usually terrible. That's usually the way that goes. But when you have a movie adaptation of a movie adaptation of a game franchise, the potential is to be great with that because they're different. It's dynamically different. The different parameters there. But what do you think about let's start with game adaptations of movies?
Here's the thing. Game adaptations of films, I feel like can go both ways. Because a lot of great games happen to be movie adaptations, I feel. The main one that really pops to my mind is like Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
I think that's like before Spider-Man, Insomniac Spider-Man came out, that was the gold standard of Spider-Man game because it had the great swinging, good combat, a good story. But then there's other ones.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of Spider-Man games.
No. I mean, in general, in terms of adaptations.
Oh yeah. Well, the Batman adaptations. See, those were they made a bunch of different ones. And back in the day with games, like let's say '89 Batman, you had the Nintendo, you had the SNES, you had the Super Nintendo after that, but then you also had Genesis or the Mega Drive, and each company would do it differently.
But it was all the same style too. It was always a side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Side-scrolling beat 'em up, but slightly different. But it didn't all look the same because after a while, games had like this uniformity to where companies would be like, okay. Even Disney with the Aladdin game, which is the controversial thing, like Sega, Super NES, and the Game Boy were all different, and they were all different styles. Different things. You had different weapons, different abilities, and the Batman game was like that too. They never really did one for Superman. There was like the Sunsoft Superman. That was a ridiculously difficult game. But yeah, Superman never really had luck with games. The Countdown to Apocalypse, the Superman the animated series game, I liked that a lot. That was like GameCube and PS2, I think. That was a really good game.
Yeah, Superman Returns had a game adaptation, didn't it?
They did. The game I played it wasn't great. The flying was fun. The flying was the first time you could really just lift off and fly into the clouds.
That's the thing I feel like they gotta emphasize and focus on.
Right?
That's the thing you have to get right.
I know.
flying because
And they did for Returns. It was good. It was the best that I'd ever played at that point because you just zoom and then do like your push off flights where you start flying real fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, the villains they didn't follow the film. That's the thing. It didn't follow the film at all because you really couldn't because there's no one to fight and you punch Lex Luthor once he explodes. So there wasn't really a lot you could do.
Right.
So they tried to adapt different comic book things and do it, and it just didn't work, which is the problem. But the mechanics of the flying were fun. That was I just turned it on and just fly for an hour.
And I feel like it can work. You know, just having that sort of same look. Maybe that suit design, maybe having similar looking characters, but making your own thing of it is, I think, what helps.
Yeah.
I think of another one that comes to mind, Transformers the game.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Based off of the first film.
Yeah.
That's an open world beat 'em up, blow up everything, traversing.
But that was such a good game.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
It follows the script loosely, but then it introduces different elements that you don't really see.
Right.
Things go down differently. You have different enemies to fight.
Right.
And I think that's where the focus should be, on the fun rather than the adaptation process. I mean, you can use designs, you can use certain elements, but you got to focus on making it a game first and then adapting afterwards.
No, and you have to be. I think you have to also, this happens too. Companies just aren't as involved with who they hire to make their games.
And a lot of times too, it's mostly based off of an unfinished script or
Right.
concept design or things like that. Unfinished
Material.
because in the end it has to come out to coincide. And I feel like that's why you don't really see stuff like that anymore. There's no real tie-in movie games. Maybe like a mobile game, but that's it.
Because the filmmakers have to be very much they have to be intimately involved in the gaming process, and that's just so much work for everybody. So it's a huge undertaking, but it should be done because that would one hand washes the other. It would help a lot.
And I feel like that's why now superheroes and other things are getting separate game adaptations that borrow elements from films, maybe even looks, certain callbacks,
Certain themes,
certain themes, but it all is its own thing.
Right.
Thinking about Spider-Man, Insomniac Spider-Man, thinking about the Avengers for done by Square Enix.
Right.
Even Mad Max.
Right.
Done for PS4 and stuff like that. It was in that sort of universe and that style, but it's still its own thing.
Right.
And I think that works. Heck, even Godzilla for PS4.
Yeah.
It's just a fun, a sort of fun beat 'em up sort of thing.
That's good. See, I haven't played that, but that's
expensive.
That's crazy. Oh, is it really?
It's like $300. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, why not?
Delisted.
Jeez, that's another topic. But
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other show.
We could probably get into that later.
We will.
Oh, yeah.
But with stuff like that, Captain America it's kind of an expensive one.
Captain America and Black Panther are getting their own thing. It's funny I bring it up like that.
Yeah, that was
but in a sense, it's like these characters are much more popular now because of their film adaptations.
Yeah.
Not to discredit the comics or the work that's been done there, but it's like these are now household names because of this cinematic universe thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And that's why they're getting games. Wolverine is getting a game.
Yeah. Wolverine's had a lot of games.
He's had a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, X-Men Origins Wolverine for PS3 is probably one of the best superhero games.
Yeah.
And that's a movie adaptation game. There you go, another one.
Yeah. That's right.
It all cuts in.
That's right. And
Scooby-Doo 2 for the Game Boy.
Scooby-Doo 2, yeah. Scooby-Doo 2.
That's bias again, but it still works because it loosely adapts the script.
Right.
But it focuses on the fun aspect first because it's a side scroller, solving mysteries, collecting clues,
Yeah. You can tell when a company has a vested interest in it and they want to make something good, as opposed to a company that doesn't know what they're doing. Just like one of the worst games ever made is Superman for N64. That was based on Superman the Animated Series, and that was bad. As opposed to the games they made for Batman the Animated Series, which are still beloved, the Sega and Super NES games and the Game Boy games. I've played them all, and they're a lot of fun still. But, there's a lot of input in that. With Superman, it was a French company doing it from what I remember reading. And what happened was that they, halfway through, Warner Brothers just said, nah, we don't care. And they stopped having any involvement in it. So they had to figure it out. The French company had to figure out how to do it on their own, which they did. And it was utterly terrible. The flying mechanics are the worst you've ever had to come through. It was so complicated.
I've never seen anything beyond the rings.
It was so bad. Yeah, because nobody ever wants to play beyond that. Because they had to finish it off, and it was just such a bad job. And it's one of the worst. It's actually credited, and it isn't just me saying it, but it's credited as one of the worst video games ever made.
Ever. I think there with E.T. for the Atari, right?
Yeah, something that was really bad. But with stuff like that, it's hit or miss. But do you think that games do better when they're adapted from films, or do films do better when they're adapted from games?
I think it's about even.
Okay.
Because here's the thing: movie, TV show adaptations of video games do better. They are successful financially. Most of the times, critically, utter just bottom of the barrel. I mean, immediately what comes to mind is like the Resident Evil adaptations. But at the same time, too, it's more so association with the name rather than its story.
Right.
Because there's hardly any tie-ins to the game. Maybe a few characters and maybe like a plot point.
Right.
But other than that, it's its own separate story.
Right.
And then at that point, it kind of brings it up to me. Well, do you really look at it as an adaptation? Or do you just look at it as an inspiration, just with the same name?
Right.
Even with the Silent Hill films, I feel like those are definitely their own story, just borrowing elements.
Right.
Except Revelations, the second one, that one definitely followed more so the story of 3,
Right.
and doing its own thing with it too.
Interesting.
I feel like financially they'll always do well, but critically as well is where they usually suffer.
Well, that's another aspect of it too, because horror always makes money.
Horror always makes money.
In films, remember back in the days of Redbox, you probably don't remember this, but back in the days of Redbox, those like DVD kiosks, you would see so much. I mean, I don't mean to put down the filmmakers, but so much like low budget, kind of bad horror.
It's so easy to make.
But it still made money. That's why they did those. That's why they were filled with mostly B horror films, because horror films always make money, and they really still did. And that's kind of still the rule when it comes to filmmaking. If you're going to do something, if you're going to experiment, make it a horror film, because that always makes cash.
It always will, because there's always something you can do there.
Yeah.
Even if it's the most generic plot, there's got to be something.
People like to be scared. They like, and in games too, like the Resident Evil games, like they're and
some of the more popular like series, like there's some. I think they are like the most popular games. I think even now, again, going back to the whole social media thing,
right?
There's a lot of interest and like hype built up around these games.
Yeah.
And I see it more so for maybe because I'm part of that sort of fandom, but Resident Evil,
right?
You see it for Silent Hill, you see it for even Dead by Daylight,
right?
Because that has a lot of horror ties into it.
There's something about it that keeps it fresh, and I'm chiming in only because I'm the only horror franchise I really, really dig is like the Left 4 Dead stuff or the Valve stuff,
right?
So and
Half-Life,
Half-Life.
Stuff,
There's something to being scared, even in gameplay. There's something that keeps it fresh and keeps it going. Because I played the same levels for so long, but at the same time, they do switch things up in the game through their the engines they use to animate the characters. But there is definitely something there that keeps it fresh in your mind and makes you really want to keep playing it years later. We have a friend that works at Retro Hex, and he's got every copy
of Resident Evil like 3 times in a row.
Yeah, every version, and he's got like a warehouse full of them somewhere that he's just gonna will to his children at some point, and they can buy a small island. But it's kind of fascinating. But horror just has its fans for a reason. The Halloween films, and we're both fans of Michael Myers, and
of course,
that franchise never had a really good game though. Except
it only had the one on Atari, right?
Atari, which is on the Steam Deck here. But also, the Retro Realms did the.
Oh, you're right, Retro Realms. I totally forgot about that. You're right.
It's an 8-bit game, and that's actually a terrific little game.
Yeah,
it's a really cool, creepy game.
Yeah. Here's the thing: a lot of retro callback 8-bit games do so well now. It's kind of what people yearn for, which is really interesting to see that.
I mean, I remember because a couple of us at the shop have the game. We got the Retro Realms game, and with that one, I think it's the game you wish you could have had when the movie came out if you were alive at that time. But I mean, it's something that feels like it could have been because the movies are of a certain vintage, the movies are a certain age, and 8-bit is a certain age, and they kind of overlap. So it just kind of fits and it works.
You like it so much because it's the thing you've always wanted.
Yeah.
It's finally like, oh my God, they're doing something that's catered directly towards me, and it looks how I wanted it to look, and it plays like how I wanted it to play. Yep. Even with like the new Ninja Turtles game.
Yep. The Shredder's Revenge.
Even with Marvel, the new one, Cosmic Invasion. That's a super like callback to like early '90s, mid '90s like beat 'em ups from. SNES, Genesis, things of that sort.
Yeah, and I think, and now that you're saying that, I think that's probably why the Lego games did so well, because it's kind of a similar idea. taking things back to a more simple level, but they're just so intrinsically entertaining.
They're so fun. They're so lively. The music, I
Yeah.
think, helps a lot. The animation, the,
The
look of the
comedy.
characters, the
Yeah.
comedy. Because, no offense to the modern ones, but those classic Lego games just had such a charm since the characters never talked.
Right.
They always had to enact it with
Yeah.
or you know,
Yeah.
like with facial expression, all that stuff. Like I always think back to that scene in Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga, where Vader pulls out the picture of him and the pregnant Padme, and he points it and shows Luke, and it looks like.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thinking that that's fun. And
It's
have
very
and
fun.
it makes it fun for you too.
It
because-
adapts beloved stories, but then just does something so fun with it.
but it's done in a loving way.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
It's
like-
always done with
yeah.
love. It doesn't matter that it's just a Lego game. You collect the bricks and the mini kits and all that, but it's still adapting something great. For me, I think the best Lego game is Lego Batman, the first one.
I love that game.
It's so
I love
good.
that game.
It's its own story, but it takes so much from the comics. It uses the score
Yeah.
from the Tim Burton films.
Yep.
You know, when I was growing up, I'm like, well, Lego Batman song, and then
Right.
when I watched Tim Burton's film, I'm like, why are they using the Lego Batman song?
How
You
did
know?
that happen?
How did that happen? That's weird. It's just they put so much
Love into
care.
it.
Yeah, love. It feels like a project that's made with the intent of being entertaining,
Yeah.
of doing something right. And then those designs I feel like are timeless now.
Yeah, because we all kind of grew up with Legos. That's the crazy thing too. It's also specific to an era, but overlapping generations in a way to take a phrase. But the funny thing is, I think the big part of it is doing it with love.
Yeah.
They loved it growing up, who created it, and then they made it for those who will love it for generations to come. But because there is like a mocking, they're kind of mocking it. They're kind of making a little bit of fun, but they're doing it with the right amount of love,
You know what?
and it's funny.
This kind of ties back because Lego Batman, the video game, but then there's a Lego Batman movie,
Right,
which,
came after.
yeah,
Yeah.
came after. But it adapts that sort of humor and that sort of wackiness in the universe, but then makes it still its own thing.
That's right.
Would that be considered a video game adaptation?
It's God. That's so funny. It's so meta. It's a video game adaptation of a film franchise, which was the adaptation of a comic book franchise, which eventually became a movie adaptation of the game franchise.
It kind of loops all together.
That's amazing. I never thought of that. That's right.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Because even the design of Batman in the film borrows from Lego Batman 2, Lego Batman 3.
Yeah.
Even some of the character design choices.
Well, it's the Tim
all of
Burton
that.
Batman too, because it's the
Yeah.
black suit.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Burton.
That's
All
right.
ties back to
so
him.
it all goes back to Tim. That's interesting to think of, but it's kind of fascinating how those things all tie in, especially
Right.
with comic books, games, and all that stuff. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Once again, I'm Ty Justice,
And I'm JCPR.
and this has been Gamers at the End of the World. Please like, share, subscribe, and give us your opinions about what your favorite game adaptations are.
What your favorite Lego game is, possibly?
Yeah, and all that. And if you didn't like what we're doing, just go ahead and tell us that in the comments too. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.